It was around 7:40 that morning when I pulled up to Vera's school. She leaned forward from the back seat, fastening her ponytail the way she always did when she felt unsure. "Grandma packed my bag already," she said, like it was no big deal. "I didn't check." That wasn't unusual. After a few days with Marianne and Reuben, she often came home with her hair braided tighter, her manners a little sharper, her words sounding more like theirs than mine. Still, I nodded. I kissed her forehead. "Do your best today, okay?" I watched her walk through the school gates. There was nothing in her step that hinted at what I'd find next. Back home, I reached for the backpack absent-mindedly. It was heavier than it should have been. Vera's usual setup was light. Snack, coloring journal, maybe a little plush toy clipped to the zipper. But this, it thudded onto the kitchen counter like it didn't belong there. I unzipped it and saw it immediately. Not her lunchbox, not her snacks. There was a sandwich bag with someone else's name written in cursive on masking tape, a folded envelope, different handwriting, and then the sticker. A shiny laminated tag on the inside flap. Property of Emily and Emerson Drager. My breath stalled. Emerson, my niece, Emily's daughter. I stood there, holding the strap, unable to set it down. It wasn't just a bag. It was a headline, a quiet message, and I'd received it loud and clear. They didn't just mix up the backpacks. They didn't just forget. They erased. I thought maybe it was me overreacting. Maybe I was being sensitive again. I told myself that for years. When my name wasn't on the family reunion invite, when my seat was always near the door, when I was told, "We thought you were busy," again and again. But seeing Vera's name replaced, her things tucked into a bag labeled for someone else, it wasn't just about me anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the bag open beside me. Staring. Quiet. A part of me reached for the phone because that's what daughters do. We call our mothers. We assume they'll clarify. Marianne picked up on the second ring. "Calla, everything all right?" I tried to sound neutral. "Vera came home with Emerson's backpack, I think. There was a sticker with her name." "Oh, that! It's just a backpack," she interrupted, as if I'd asked something trivial. "Emerson must have grabbed the wrong one. They're kids." I said nothing. I was about to hang up, but she added one more thing. "At least Emerson's things are always neat. I knew that one wasn't hers." Click. That was it. A sentence tossed like a bone. I sat there, still holding the phone even after the line went dead. Not angry, just stilled. Later, when I finally pulled myself back to the bag, I looked again at the sticker. Not just a cheap tag. It was one of those personalized, printed types from Etsy or something. Gold lettering, pastel background. Expensive, deliberate. Property of Emily and Emerson Drager. Not a mention of Vera, not even a placeholder for me. I held the edge of the flap and ran my thumb along the border, like maybe I'd find our names beneath, waiting to be scratched back into existence. Of course I didn't. It reminded me of the time Emily threw a birthday party for her daughter and accidentally printed family thank you cards that left out Vera's name entirely. When I asked, she said, "Oh, the design app must have cropped the list." And I believed her. But this wasn't cropping. This was carving. I leaned back in my chair. The house was still. Vera wouldn't be home until 3. The silence gave space to thoughts I hadn't let rise in a long time. Why am I always the one they forget? Why am I always the one who has to excuse it? And now, why is Vera being drafted into that same pattern? I thought of that moment this morning when she said, "I didn't check," like it wasn't hers to check. Like her things, her name, her identity, had already been reassigned. A voice inside me whispered, not new, but sharper than before, "Don't start a war over a sticker, Calla." But another voice answered, one I hadn't heard in years. What if this isn't a war? What if it's a quiet invasion? I didn't make a scene. I didn't call back. I didn't write a scathing group message. I just stared at that bag and felt the ground shift, one silent inch at a time, because this time, it wasn't just about me. After the backpack incident, I needed space. The house was quiet. Vera wouldn't be home for hours, and I had no client calls scheduled. I walked into my office, sat in the creaky chair by the window, and stared at the bookshelf for a while, not really seeing it. Then I stood up, opened the closet, and pulled out the box labeled Donations. It was an old habit. When the silence felt like too much, I cleaned, sorted, donated, threw out what didn't belong. I opened the lid. A mix of sweaters, kids' books, mismatched kitchen towels. I pushed some fabric aside, and there it was, a small Ziploc bag. Inside it, a bracelet I hadn't seen since middle school. Red thread, silver bead, knotted unevenly. 5th grade arts and crafts. I made it for my mother, gave it to her on Mother's Day. She told me it was sweet, but disappeared by the end of that week. When I asked, she said she must have lost it. Now it sat at the bottom of a box, in a bag meant for goodwill. So it wasn't lost. Just discarded. And now I was the one who found it. I held it in my palm, not crying, not angry, just still, the way you get when something old clicks into place. I set it down on my desk, beside my laptop, and left it there. I didn't know why. Emily dropped by later that evening, said she was picking up a book Mom wanted. Vera was with her. Apparently Mom had called and asked for some grandmother time. I opened the door. Let them in. Polite. No need to start anything. While Emily talked, Vera wandered into my office. A minute later, she called out, "Hey, Mom, is this Aunt Emily's bracelet?" I turned toward her. "Which one?" She held it up. The red one. My red one. Emily laughed from the kitchen. "Oh, that? Yeah, Mom gave it to me ages ago. I thought it was Grandma's, actually. Funny, right?" I didn't laugh. I didn't correct her. I just watched Vera put it down. Like it didn't matter. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it never did. Emily walked over to grab Vera's homework folder, left behind from the mix-up earlier. She flipped through it and paused. "Hey, this locket. Grandma said she was saving this for Emerson. She wants to give it to her on her 13th birthday." I didn't move, didn't blink. That locket was mine. It had been promised to me when I was 13. Silver oval, hinged, with a little heart on the clasp. I remembered holding it once, just once, before it vanished from the jewelry box. On my 14th birthday, I asked where it went. Mom said, "You'll get something more practical later. Emily deserves this now." And that was the end of it. Until today. I watched Emily tuck the folder under her arm. She looked pleased, like she'd found a treasure meant to be hers all along. I didn't say anything. Let her leave. Later that night, I opened my laptop. Blank document. Typed. Things they once said were mine. Then I hit delete. The words didn't look right on the page. "They never had." I whispered, "I guess it never really was." Then closed the screen. And in the dark, I remembered that argument. I must have been 12. We were at Grandma's, and Emily had just gotten a new jacket, one I'd picked out months ago in a catalog. I said, "Why do you always give her the things I was supposed to have?" Mom didn't flinch. She kept folding laundry and said, "Because she doesn't question everything, Calla." That answer had followed me into adulthood like lint clinging to everything I wore. Now I looked at Vera's drawing on the fridge. 2 butterflies, one bigger, one smaller. No names. I found myself asking something I never dared before. Is it possible they were never proud of me to begin with? Maybe I hadn't been written out of the family. Maybe I was never really written in. The pain wasn't in the locket, not the bracelet either. It was in Vera's eyes when she recognized what was happening. Because she was starting to disappear in the same way I had. It was past 6 when I walked past the bookshelf in the hallway and caught sight of the old green spine. I hadn't touched that photo album in years. Not because I forgot it was there, because I remembered exactly what it held. Birthdays, holidays, smiles with just enough teeth showing. The kind of curated memories families build when they're more concerned with the frame than the truth inside it. Vera trailed behind me, still clutching the snack she'd been nibbling on since dinner. "Is that you when you were little?" she asked, pointing at the spine. I hesitated. "Sort of. Want to look?" We sat together on the floor, cross-legged on the rug. I flipped open the front cover. 1997-2005, the label read. The first pages were harmless. Christmas tree pictures, summer barbecues, beach days with sunburnt noses. Vera pointed at Uncle Mason's mustache and giggled. He looks like someone in a cartoon. I smiled at that, let her giggle. But then she turned the page. One big family photo. Dad, Mom, Emily, Mason, Olive. Everyone seated neatly on the living room couch in front of the fireplace. Stockings hung perfectly above them. Vera leaned in. "Where are you in this one?" I leaned in too. I wasn't. I knew that photo, knew the exact smell of the sweater I was wearing that day, because I never got the chance to be in the shot. I'd been upstairs, grounded, told to sit and reflect after I'd asked Mom why I wasn't allowed to audition for the church Christmas solo like Emily. Her response was short. "If you can't support your sister, you don't need to be in the picture." Vera waited for an answer. I gave her the best lie I had left. Sometimes families don't know how to show that everyone belongs. She didn't press, just kept flipping pages. 2 spreads later, something slipped out between the sleeves. A small envelope. No stamp. Just thin, cream-colored cardstock inside. Vera opened it. Her voice perked. "It's a birthday card." Then her eyes narrowed as she read, "To our brilliant granddaughter, Emerson." She looked up. "Did Grandma send this to me? By mistake?" I took the card from her hand gently. Inside was a printed note. "We're so proud of you, your talent, your poise, your promise. The kind of message you'd write for a graduation, a scholarship, or a kid whose name you remembered on purpose. It had been in the backpack all along." I didn't have to explain it to Vera. I think she already knew. We sat in silence for a bit. I tried to hold steady while the weight of it settled in. One card, one photo, 2 reminders of how easy it is to cut someone out without scissors. It wasn't about a missing seat at the table. It was the unspoken math of their love, subtracting where they didn't want to see, adding praise where it suited them, dividing the legacy like a checklist. I flashed back to junior year. I had brought home a school award, creative writing, district-wide recognition. Dad nodded and said, "That's great, but let's not brag about things that don't really matter in the long run." That same week, Emily got a certificate for helping with the PTA bake sale. They threw a dinner party, balloons, cake, applause. Vera slid another photo toward me. I couldn't look. I walked to the kitchen, gripping the album under my arm, my back to her. Then I heard it. "Do you think they wish I was Emerson?" I didn't turn around right away. Instead, I opened the drawer by the fridge, placed the birthday card inside, and closed it with care. Then I said, "They don't get to decide who you are, and they definitely don't get to rewrite who I was." And I meant every word. I had just wrapped up a session with a teenager who hadn't spoken a full sentence in 2 weeks. She whispered her way through the last 10 minutes, and I considered that a win. My own voice, though, I hadn't used it all morning, not for anything that mattered. I sat at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, opened my inbox, clicked through spam, then paused at a subject line. Tuition receipt for Vera Drager, copy for family records. I clicked it open, expecting nothing. Bottom of the email. Received from Emily Drager. I blinked. Checked the timestamp. I had paid that bill last Tuesday. The school had my payment, my card, my login, my receipt. I scrolled down. Another line, almost invisible. Per updated guardian contact info provided by grandparent, we've adjusted records accordingly. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. I read it again, slower. They didn't just change an address, they changed who I was. I logged into my banking app, screenshot the charge. I called the school. The woman on the phone was kind, too kind. That customer service tone people use when they know something's wrong but can't say it. We were told to redirect all guardian and emergency contact info to Emily. It was a request from Vera's grandparents. My mouth didn't move. She added, "They said it was to ease coordination, in case of emergency." I thanked her. Hung up. Sat there. Still. Guardian. It echoed. Not just a word, a legal classification. They hadn't removed my name. They'd rewritten it. An hour later, still sitting at my desk, a text popped up from Vera's pediatrician. "Thanks for confirming the canceled appointment today." I hadn't canceled anything. I called the clinic. They answered on the second ring. "Oh yes," the receptionist said. "Your mother called, said Vera would be staying with her this weekend, that you'd be out of town." Second time that day. 2 systems, 2 decisions, both without me. I didn't scream. I didn't even frown, but I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove to Flagstaff. Didn't text, didn't call. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was too high to offer shade. Marianne was in the front garden, pruning hydrangeas like nothing in the world had shifted. "You could have called," she said, not looking up. "We're not hiding anything, honey." Emily's car was already parked. She came out of the side door holding a bag of groceries. She smiled like it was any other Thursday. "Mom just wanted to help make things easier for you. You're always so overwhelmed lately." My hands stayed by my sides. They weren't lying. That was the trick. They weren't stealing. They were helping. They weren't taking over. They were coordinating. Every sentence felt like it had been rehearsed. That kind of softness people weaponize so they can't be accused of anything harsh. I took a slow breath, the kind you draw when you're trying not to fold in public. Then I looked at both of them and said, "Helping is asking first. Overriding isn't help. It's theft, just dressed in love." They went quiet. Emily tilted her head. "We thought you'd appreciate the support." "You've erased me in private for years," I continued. "Now you're doing it in public systems. That won't continue." No shouting, no drama, just the words they didn't expect me to say. I turned, walked back to the car, and got in. My hands trembled on the wheel, but my face stayed steady. They were still standing in the driveway when I pulled away. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had convinced myself it was just another school event, nothing worth preparing for, just a fundraiser, some parent-teacher chatter, a few baked goods. Vera had been excited, though. She even wore her second-best dress, the one with the faded lavender sleeves, said she didn't want to get her good one dirty. We pulled into the school parking lot around 4. The sun was still stubborn above the horizon, and the crowd outside the gym buzzed like bees around a hive. A banner hung across the entryway. "Thank you to our generous donors, Emily Drager, Reuben Marianne Drager." I read it once. Then again, my name wasn't on it. I had written a check 3 weeks ago, anonymously at the time because I didn't want praise. But standing under that banner, watching my daughter grin and skip toward the door, something sank inside me. Not rage, just that old familiar weight, that quiet sinking. I smiled at Vera. "Let's go see your art." Inside, tables lined the gym walls, student projects, parent-signed clipboards, cupcakes in plastic wrap. Vera tugged me toward her class's section. At one point, a student aide came around handing out thank you cards to donor families. Vera took one, beaming, then read it aloud. "Thank you, Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Emily for supporting our school so generously." She paused, blinked, then looked up at me. "Didn't you give money too?" I bent slightly, brushing her bangs from her eyes. "Some people write checks," I said quietly. "Others write names." Later, after the cupcake judging and recycled applause, a teacher strolled over to compliment Vera's painting. "She's so talented," she said warmly, then turned to Emily. "You must be proud." Emily smiled with that polite discomfort she wore so well. "Oh no," she laughed. "She's not mine. She's Calla's." The teacher blinked. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just assumed." She didn't finish. I didn't correct her either. The moment passed like a sneeze someone tried to hold in. Quick, uncomfortable, gone. I watched Vera trace her name on her project sign, slow and careful. She was proud of it, proud to have done something worth standing behind. I was proud too. But pride doesn't protect you from being erased. Near the refreshment table, I waited for Emily to step away from a cluster of PTA moms. When she finally did, I caught her eye and said softly, "Did you correct the school when they sent that list?" She shrugged, lifting her cup. "It was already printed. I didn't think it was a big deal." I nodded. "You didn't think it was a big deal," I said, "because it wasn't your name they erased." Her lips parted like she might respond, but nothing came out. I walked away before she found the words. On the drive home, Vera was quiet. No questions about her painting, no stories about the other kids. Just the road ahead and her fingers tracing invisible circles on the window glass. 10 minutes in, she asked, "Why do people keep thinking I belong to someone else?" I pulled the car to the shoulder, let the silence breathe for a few seconds. Then I turned to her. "Because sometimes," I said, "people are more comfortable with the stories they've told themselves than the truth that's standing right in front of them." She nodded, looked down at her lap. "But you'll always tell them, right?" she said. I reached over, took her hand, squeezed it. "Always." Monday evening, Vera was in her room working on a school project, something about ecosystems. She hummed now and then, just loud enough for me to know she was there, not loud enough to break the silence I was sitting in. I was at the dining table with her iPad. Her teacher had asked her to send in a voice memo from a group presentation. I figured I'd help her find it, upload it, save her some clicks. I knew how clunky the file system could be. There were 4 folders: school, dance, drawings, and chats. Inside chats, a file named Nana Chat 2. I pressed play. Thought I'd hear Marianne reading a bedtime story or singing a lullaby. Something sweet, harmless. Instead, Kala always overcomplicates things. She plays victim so people don't see how bad she is at being a mother. The voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, calm, like someone explaining a cooking recipe. Emily responded, "She thinks being quiet makes her noble. It just makes her irrelevant." They weren't angry, just honest, as if I were a file folder they had reviewed and decided to archive. Not worth keeping, not worth confronting. I sat there, still holding the iPad, the sound of their voices swirling in my ears long after the clip ended. Not because it hurt, not because it shocked me, because it confirmed everything I'd tried not to believe. I didn't cry, didn't say anything out loud, just breathed in through my nose and whispered, "So this is how they talk when I'm not around." Later that night, after dinner and dishes, I tucked Vera into bed. She was already half asleep when I brushed her hair back and kissed her temple. Then she opened her eyes just long enough to say, "Grandma says you're too sensitive. That's why you cry when no one's watching." I froze, forced a smile. "Did she say that to you?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Not really. I just heard her say it to Aunt Emily." I kissed her again. Tighter this time, and walked out of the room without another word. I didn't go far, just outside her door, into the hallway where the floor creaked and the light was dim. I sank down against the wall, pulled my knees in, and I remembered being 15, hearing them talk about me through a cracked bedroom door. The words were different back then, but the rhythm was the same. Disappointment dressed in fake concern. "She's too emotional. She overthinks everything. If she didn't push so hard, maybe people would like her more." I hadn't fought back then. I had smiled, stayed quiet, done what daughters are supposed to do. That night, on the floor, I whispered something to the younger version of me still curled up inside. "You weren't overreacting. You were just the only one reacting at all." And for the first time, I believed it. Being quiet hadn't made me strong. It had made me easy to rewrite. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, turned on the light. Opened my laptop, a blank document. I typed a list, backpack mix-up. Items relabeled, tuition attributed to Emily doctor's appointment, canceled without notice. Thank you card with no mention, teacher mistaking Vera's parent. The recording I titled the file, Proof of Pattern. Then I wrote one sentence underneath, "When they call this petty, I'll show them the line they erased first." I saved the file, closed the lid, and sat in the dark. I wasn't planning revenge. I was drawing the line. Tuesday started like most days after a long weekend. Quiet, predictable, even a little boring. I had the house to myself for a few hours, so I figured I'd clear out some digital clutter. Vera's iPad needed syncing, and I needed to stop avoiding the mountain of school forms I'd left sitting in my inbox. That's when the notification popped up on my laptop. Shared drive updated, family folder, last edited 5 minutes ago. I hadn't touched that folder in years. It was the same cloud drive we all used back when Dad was still doing tax prep for the family, and Emily insisted we keep everything digitally transparent. I clicked. Inside, a PDF titled Draft Legacy Plan Emily. It wasn't locked, it wasn't hidden, it was just there. The first few lines looked like any standard estate planning document. Legalese, asset lists, trustee roles. My eyes scanned until one sentence yanked my breath out of my chest. In the event of estate succession, Emily Drager will assume primary administrative authority over the family trust, including educational allocations for dependent minor, Vera Drager. My name? Not once. No mention of me, only Vera, tied to Emily's oversight like a bullet point in a spreadsheet. My heart didn't race, it just stopped. This wasn't just being forgotten. This was being deleted, with a pen and a notary. My stomach turned. And then I remembered something Grandma had said when I was 16, back when I used to spend summers at the lake house with her. "You'll inherit this one day," she'd whispered. "You're the only one who doesn't fill the silence with noise." I kept scrolling. The lake house will be gifted to the daughter who has remained loyal to the family image. And right below that, suggested guardianship of Vera Drager to Emily Drager until the child reaches 18. They weren't making suggestions, they were preparing paperwork. Just then, my phone buzzed, a voicemail alert from Vera's school. I listened. "Hi, Ms. Drager. Just following up on Vera's early pickup last Friday. Hope the weekend with her aunt went well." I froze. What early pickup? I hadn't arranged anything. I called the school right back. The receptionist was pleasant, almost apologetic. According to our records, the pickup was authorized by a signed form from Ms. Emily Drager. Your mother was present to confirm. My voice cracked without rising. Vera was taken out of school without my knowledge. There was a pause on the line. I assumed you knew. I ended the call without another word. I didn't drive. I didn't run. I moved with something deeper than urgency. By noon, I was standing in their front yard in Flagstaff. The garden was overgrown and full of roses that bloomed without apology. Marianne was out front with pruning shears, clipping dead heads from stems. She didn't look surprised when I walked up. "You could have called," she said. "We're not hiding anything, honey." I didn't answer. Not yet. Emily stepped out onto the porch holding a paper grocery bag. She smiled like I was there to borrow sugar. "Mom just wanted to help make things easier. You've seemed under strain." I didn't look at either of them. I just pulled the printout from my bag and unfolded it slowly. I tapped the line about guardianship and held it up so they couldn't pretend to miss it. "This isn't help," I said. My voice was steady. "This is premeditated control." Emily opened her mouth, but I raised my hand before she could speak. "And let me be clear. If you ever take her again without my consent, I will involve the courts." I let that hang for a moment, then added, "I won't ask twice." There was no yelling, no tears, no drama. Just ice. Thursday evening, just past 6, the kind of night where everything feels fine from a distance. A restaurant with dim lights and just enough noise to make you think you're part of something warm. Family gathered for Emerson's pre-birthday dinner, semi-formal, casual enough to not feel like a trap, formal enough that you couldn't walk out without it being noticed. Vera and I arrived on time. Not early, just not late enough to make a point. The table was long, white tablecloths with faux gold chargers. Vera's name card sat snug between Emily and Marianne, decorated with a little pink bow. Hers was the only one with a flower glued to it. There was no card for me. A waiter pointed toward the far end, near the window, just left of the coat rack. Not banished, just managed. I took my seat. Dinner started. Bread rolls passed. Conversations circling around upcoming travel plans, PTA elections, choir rehearsals. I nodded when spoken to, smiled when it seemed expected. Vera giggled with Emily. Marianne leaned in now and then, brushing her hair back like she belonged more to them than to me. Halfway through the salad course, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Emily had tagged me in a Facebook post. I clicked. A photo from earlier. Everyone at the table, glasses raised, smiles perfect. Caption: Grateful for strong roots and future leaders. #family, legacy, #Emerson's tribe. I looked at the picture again. I was there, sort of. A sliver of my sleeve, just the edge. Not cropped out, not exactly, just irrelevant. I scrolled the comments. So beautiful. Is that Emerson's mom beside her? Emily replied with a heart emoji. That did it. As I leaned forward to pour water into Vera's glass, I heard it. Marianne's voice, just low enough to sound like she wasn't trying to be heard, but loud enough that she knew she would be. She always makes everything about her. Even now, she can't just let us have one peaceful evening. Vera looked at me, her eyes questioning something she couldn't put words to yet. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out the butterfly, the one Vera had folded weeks ago, the one I kept. I placed it next to my glass. Then the toast began. Marianne stood, holding her wine. We are so proud of Emerson, she said. She is everything we dreamed of when we thought of the next generation. Composed, loyal, focused. Emily dabbed her eye, overly rehearsed. And family, Marianne continued, is about legacy, about the children who carry the best parts of us forward. Then her voice softened, practiced. Some people drift from family, and that's okay. Not everyone belongs in the center. I didn't look up, but I felt the table nod, felt Emily's hand rest gently on Marianne's, felt Vera's gaze shift toward me. I didn't move. After dessert menus were handed out, I stood, walked to the front. Asked the manager if I could borrow the screen, said I wanted to show something. Family slideshow, I said. Just that. He agreed. The lights dimmed. No music. No narration. Just slides. Vera's drawings. Mommy and me. A receipt. My name on it. A cropped scan of the lake house deed. Emily's signature. No mention of me. The birthday card addressed to Emerson. A screenshot of the tuition receipt. An audio clip. Marianne's voice. Calla always overcomplicates things. She plays victim so people don't see how bad she is at being a mother. Then one final image, the butterfly. Below it, when you forget, just look for the butterfly. Silence. No one clapped. No one coughed. I stepped forward. You wanted one peaceful evening, I said. You earned it. I paused. But you don't get peace from painting over truth. I turned to Vera, kissed her on the head. Let's go home. We walked out, past the table, past the comments, past the eyes that looked everywhere but at me. And no yelling, no scene, just the sound of a door closing behind us. Saturday morning sunlight spilled into the kitchen like it had no memory. The house was still, not quiet from emptiness, quiet from absence. And for once, that absence didn't feel sharp. It felt clean. Vera sat at the dining table, humming as she drew on loose printer paper. 2 butterflies, a small heart between them. I poured tea, slower than usual. No rush, no pressure. I didn't have to brace for a call or rehearse a response. I checked my phone out of habit. No new messages, no missed calls, no apologies. It's strange how silence shifts shape. When you expect it, it stings. When you stop expecting, it starts to sound like peace. Vera slid the paper toward me. I showed this to Grandma once, she said, and she said you always draw things that don't exist. I looked at the paper, then at her. Sometimes, I said, we draw what we need to believe in, even when other people don't see it yet. She nodded. No further questions. Just stood up and placed the drawing next to the first butterfly she'd taped to the fridge weeks ago. I watched them sit there together. The only things in this house that hadn't been touched by someone else's permission. I spent the next hour walking slowly through memories, not dragging them, just noticing. There was the time I wasn't told about the meeting, the time they forgot to save me a seat, the constant corrections of my parenting, spoken softly but cut deep. The file folder full of rewritten roles. I saw it now, not as a timeline of betrayals, but as a pattern I used to trace and call coincidence. They didn't undo me, they just never really knew me, and that's no longer my burden. By late morning, I'd printed everything, the butterfly photo, The thank you card with Emerson's name, the tuition receipt with mine crossed out, the dinner seat card I was never given, the transcript of the audio recording. I placed them all in a folder. Labeled it unsent. No fire, no shredder, no proof to burn, just a box. Fireproof. I slid it under the bed. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was remembrance, without rage. That afternoon, Vera and I walked down to the lake, the same one Grandma had once told me would be mine someday. The same lake house now sitting in Emily's name. Vera skipped stones across the water. Her ponytail bounced with each flick of her wrist, no weight on her shoulders. She looked up and asked, "Do you think people can forget how to love?" I didn't answer right away. Then I sat beside her on the edge of the dock and said, "I think some people confuse love with control. But you'll know the difference, because you've seen both." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. We stayed until the sky began to shift. A quiet hour, stretched into 2. Not healing, not closure. Just the end of chasing a version of love that never had room for both of us. As we headed back home, hand in hand, I felt something lift, not from my chest, but from behind me. A shadow I had finally stopped carrying. My story wasn't erased, it was just rerouted, and in this version, I'm not the footnote anymore.